Hey, folks. Welcome to the Pop Culture SquadCast Live. I'm Bob Harrison. I'm solo tonight, or whenever you're watching this. Uh, we're doing, this is a recorded podcast. This is the conversation we're going to show you was recorded a couple of weeks ago. It's a different day. We're doing something a little bit different. We're trying to bring the creators from across the world to the SquadCast. We want to add their voices to the SquadCast. So they don't, a lot of times people are in other time zones across the world, and 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night's not great for them. So we kind of go out of our way or go out of our time and record it, and we're going to bring it to you probably on Thursday nights. This interview, this podcast that we're going to talk to tonight is with comic book creator and writer John Lees. He wrote books like Hotel, The Nasty, Sink, others, and also we're going to talk a lot about Orla, which is coming out in trade for Mad Cave next month. This is a lot of fun. This is a great conversation. Stay tuned to this channel. We want you to like and subscribe and follow. I'm taking a little bit of time to let you know that we have all of our video SquadCast episodes in a podcast playlist on our YouTube channel. Which most likely is where you're watching this now. You can watch any of them. There are some great conversations in there. Go back and check them out. I encourage it. I hope you would like them. Let us know what you think. Make sure that you like and follow and subscribe to us on all of our social media, whether it's Instagram or Blue Sky or Facebook, Threads as well. We want to hear from you, so let us know what you think. So John Lees is going to be on tonight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This conversation was fantastic to have. He's got a lot of really smart things to say. I do want to let you know that once I bring John in, you will see that we have subtitles. It took a bit of time for me to put that together because not everything is auto-generated, and it's a lot of words. But John has a really heavy accent. He's from Scotland, and he's really eloquent and lots of things to say. And I wanted people who are watching and listening who are unfamiliar with the nuances of Scottish accent to know what he's saying. I want you to say, believe me, he understands that it can be tough at times for Americans to understand him. Even if you listen, if you get to the end of this conversation, which I really hope you do, he tells a really funny story about a time because he wanted to set the record straight. Joe Mulvey, friend of the show, has been, according to John, incorrectly describing the story and the events that happened that John corrects at the end of this SquadCast. So when you get to the end, it's pretty funny. I hope you do. In the meantime, we really are happy to do this. Stay tuned. As I said to Pop Culture Squad and Pop Culture SquadCast sites, we do have another creator from across the world that we're going to have coming up soon. It's already been recorded, so we'd like you to listen to that stuff. In the meantime, please enjoy this conversation with John Lees. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm just in awe at that little walk down memory lane.
Oh, man, it's good.
Wow, good somebody stuff. Remembers the standard. Wow.
Yeah, no, we get it all. Like I love doing that. It's one of the things we do at the show is kind of like, let's celebrate. You've been doing this. You put yourself out there, and you've committed to this medium, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about, let's not forget it, because every step is a step. Right, whether it's celebrated or not, but let's celebrate it.
No, let's not celebrate it.
Well, no, some of it's good. Listen,
it makes me happy because, like you say, every one of those books that was featured is something that at one point in my life was like the most important thing in my life. Like all my every thought was dedicated towards for like a year or a couple of years. So yeah, every part of it is like a road in your journey, or a step in your journey.
No, absolutely. That's the point. I want to spend some time talking about some of the stuff we did there. But I really want to talk about Orla. It's coming out in the collected edition is next month in March, I believe.
It was going to be March, but apparently it's been delayed. So apparently now it's coming out on. It's coming in bookshops on Tuesday, 21st of April, and then in comic shops the next day, Wednesday, 22nd of April.
Okay, good. Well, I hope people have still time to order it because it's everyone who's read it loves it. And I think we need to get more people to read it, and that's why part of the reason why I wanted to have you on. Before we even get to you and I talking about it, I want you to see what we have here. So at the end of the year, this past year, we had a couple of other, comic book readers and critics on the show, Mars, that comic girl, and Zach Quaintance. And we were all tasked with coming up with 5 of our favorite books of the year. And I knew that Zach was going to pick Orla. So I want you to see what he had to say and what we talked about it, and see how you see your perspective on that.
Orla.
Yeah.
Such a good book.
Yeah. Another one that I knew was on you was going to be on this list.
Yeah, I actually think I mentioned Orla last time I was on the show. You all asked me what I was reading, and I was like, I got to talk about Orla. But it's stayed excellent. It's kind of a hybrid romance and monster comic. It's about a woman named Orla who turns into a monster when men are terrible, and
there's a lot of them around.
There's a lot of that around.
Yeah, she doesn't have a lot of time to herself then.
It's kind of timely in that way because it tackles sort of like Manosphere podcasters and that sort of thing. It's written by John Lees, who's excellent, usually kind of a darker writer, but he's kind of exercising a little lighter tone in this one. Illustrated by Sally Cantorino, who is one of my favorite comic artists, and she's doing career best work. Colored by Deirdre Kelly, who brings sort of a playful tone, I think, to it, and lettered by Lucas Gattoni. But this book started
rock
great.
Stars all around.
It's a perfect creative team, and they're all perfectly suited to like they all got the assignment, as they say, and are just doing perfect work on this one. And it started great, and it had a great concept, and then I think like about issue 3, it pivots into something that's surprising. Even like I would be shocked if anyone could read the first 2.5 issues and predict the end of the third one and where it kind of heads. There's still 1 issue left to be published.
All right, so I apologize for every name being incorrectly auto-generated.
It sounded right. So that's the main thing.
all 4 of you, your name was incorrectly, translated by the auto captions.
No, but that's really lovely. Like I say, I'm now going to have to go back and listen to that episode in full since I love hearing people talk about how great I am. So that's that. But it was really kind. Zach's been a big supporter. Like I remember back when Sync Volume 3 was coming out in comic shops, I think Zach was literally like the only person who was reviewing it, like on like the comics beat. He's been a big advocate of Orla from the beginning, and he's actually a great writer as well. I'm sure you'll have talked to him about Macabre Valley and stuff like that. Like, so he's like a really great writer in his own right. So it's really appreciated that he has like that kind of like, that he rates my stuff so highly. But yeah, it's just like it is nice. It's like you say, it is a book that seems to like kind of initially went like under the radar a little bit. Like didn't have made the biggest splash, like when it first came out, but the word of mouth has been really strong, and it seems like it's been picking up an audience as it's gone along. And like you say, everyone who does read it seems to really enjoy it. So I'm like, and that's the kind of stuff that I like writing. To be honest, though, I like writing things that maybe aren't for everybody, but the folk who it's for, like, it'll really click with them. So to see like those kind of like strong responses like does mean a lot. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I my wife doesn't read digitally, so, and I'm not a huge fan of digital reading digitally. I prefer it in my hand. My wife doesn't read it, and I'm like, I can't wait for the trade to get here so she can read this because she's gonna love it. I know that much already. Everything that Zach said was right, but one of the things I thought about is, I first caught. I didn't catch up on the sync stuff early, but Mountain Head and Hotel were two of the things that jumped out at me. I'm like, oh, this guy, I gotta read everything he writes, and I love it, but Orla is so different. It is definitely, and again, Sally was the perfect person to draw this. Diabla is just phenomenal, and Lucas is constantly just impressing me every time he does something new. How did that work? How did you and Sally coming together on this book work?
Well, in terms of like Sally and the creative team, it's actually kind of like fun and roundabout story. Like I remember, it goes way back to when I first picked up I Walk with Monsters. I actually picked that book up because I was like a long time Paul Cornell fan. Like I remember, like I loved like Knight and Squire, like and his action comics run from DC back in the day. And he went away and didn't do comics for a little while. He was focused on like writing like some Doctor Who stuff and some TV and things like that, and some novels. Yep. And then like it was like, oh, this is Paul Cornell's return to comics. He's writing like a book, I Walk with Monsters. So I thought I'm picking that up. So I picked it up for Paul Cornell, and Paul Cornell's writing's like as strong as it always is. Right. But what really blew me away with that book, and I think that was the lasting impression, was that Sally Cantarino's artwork in that. But sounds like, who is this person? Like, it seemed like it was the first time I'd encountered her work. Obviously, Sally has done some stuff before that, but this was the first time I'd like seen her stuff, and it was like this fully realized, fully formed, like creative dynamo. It was like just like genuinely stunned at the level of storytelling and the personality and how expressive our characters are. Like, it's kind of one of the things that our style is very stylized, but it's like deceptively detailed as well. Like, there was a lot of like, in there. And also, like, at the time, she was like colored by Deirdre Kelly for that book as well, which is why I always put the two of them in my head together. So I remember back when I did Dynasty, this is no means a slight to Adam Cahoon. I've told Adam this story before and he like laughs about it. But originally, like when Adrian Lasso at Vault, like when we were doing Dynasty, and he said to me, I always like to ask like writers this just as like, an exercise, like to get a sense in my head of like what kind of artists they're looking for. Like, if you could have like any artist draw this book, if we could get anybody like, like say Jim Lee if you want, like, if you could get any artist on board to draw this book, who would it be? And then the answer I gave was Sally Cantarino. I said that would be like my dream pick. And then at one point it was actually like, we may actually be able to get Sally Cantarino, but then it turned out she was doing another book for Vault, which turned out to be Human Remains, which is another excellent comic.
Right. That's the first time I saw her was at New York when she was talking about that book.
Yeah, and it's like another fantastic book. And I could go on a whole like tangent about that, like where like for me it's like one of the great lockdown books because it's so much about like people pretending things are normal when they're not normal, and it was coming out at that time of year. Yeah, like so ended up being like, so Sally never did Dynasty, but Adrian remembered that I'd said that, and he put Sally on as the variant cover artist. She did the B covers for the whole series. Cool. So obviously, like Dynasty worked great. Like I'd never heard of Adam before. Like we got paired up for that. Then once we paired up, it was a dream made in heaven. He was the ideal fit for the book, and we got on great. We're working on something else together now. But I always remembered in my head like Sally being like that like dream pick, and then so we got kind of like to know each other through the covers. We had a rapport for the first time. And we're talking about we should always work on something in the future. So then, like, fast forward a little bit of time, and I pitched Orla to Mad Cave, and Mike Martz at Mad Cave had picked it up and said, "Yeah, let's do this." And he'd asked a similar question. He's like, "What kind of artist were you thinking for it?" And I said Sally Cantarino. And this time, like,
it's a good answer. It's a good answer.
And then this time, like, they said, "Well, let's see if we can reach out to her," and they did. And then she was free and was available, so it all matched up. And then from there, they all kind of clicked together. Where it was like, "Who do you want to color it?" And I said, "Well, the book that made me a fan of Sally, where Human Remains and I Walk with Monsters, and their colors for that was Deirdre Kelly. So I want to get that dream team back together." So that clicked from there. And then Lucas Catoni. That was like Marla, the editor of Mad Cave at the time, had found Lucas. And I say this 100% as a compliment, but when they said we're thinking of like Lucas Catoni for the letterer, my response was genuine excitement. Is that the Harley Quinn fart comic letterer? Which is like, I remember seeing it. I posted that on socials. Like, that's some amazing fart sound effects.
He's so good. Over the last 3-4 years, he has just shot to the top of my radar.
He's pro, I've worked with and good letterers as well.
You've worked with great letterers.
Yeah, and I've worked with great letterers, but sometimes you'll see lettering, especially in books actually you'll see it across the board. Sometimes you see in superhero books as well and big 2 books, but sometimes you'll see lettering which is well done, but it's here's the artwork and now here's the lettering on top of it, and this is this person with a certain lettering style. Lucas really intuitively, everything down from the edges of the pile of the balloons and the text, it feels like it's part of the page. It feels like it's of a kind with Sally's line work and Dearborn's line work. So it feels intuitively part of the same thing.
You're right. There's a panel in issue 1, one of the first pages, the panel where she's speed dating essentially, and there's a guy who is basically telling her the fantasies that he wants, that he knows are uncomfortable, and he has no choice, but he has to ask for these really odd fantasies.
Yeah.
And the lettering for that particular character is just, you can feel the dread and yet hope in that character, in the way that it's lettered. It's perfect.
Yeah, and Lucas is just great across the board, because it was actually a bit of a disaster where he did issue 1 and he was great in issue 1, and then he broke his wrist. I think it was a soccer accident or something. And oh no, this is a disaster. What's gonna happen to Lucas? Then thankfully Sean Lee came in, and he was our letterer for issue 2. He's my letterer for Sync. And he's my rock generally, Sean Lee.
Sure.
And he did great. He came in, he really captured Lucas's vibes and stuff. And he was able to build on the groundwork that Lucas had set. But then thankfully Lucas's recovery turned out to be much faster than we thought. So Lucas was back on board for issue 3. And Lucas was a dream to work with. He was great and so thoughtful and collaborative. But really, everyone in the team brought their A game. I think Sally, she was such a great collaborator. She was sending me all of these mood boards and character inspiration things with various films she'd be watching and things. I'm thinking about drawing elements from this character, and so much of the whole visual aesthetic of the thing came from Sally, because it was Sally who had the idea of I've been reading a lot of old romance comics and I want to make this feel like a pastiche of old romance comics. So I'm gonna have that be part of the visual DNA, and it feels so integral to the book. But that was actually a Sally invention that really came from her, so she was a really great creative partner in the process. And I feel it was that. But when I look at that comic, it feels we all brought something to that to make it into something that was our own. So yeah, I think I was really happy with how it turned out.
Absolutely. I have a question. Is almond croissant the best pastry?
Yes.
Okay.
That almond croissant, the king of pastries, is an actual quote from me that I've said at various points. But generally, if I'm going to a bakery or something, I'm going to see what the almond croissant's like. And it used to be my local supermarket. I used to always a wee little weekend treat. I'd go in and pick up a couple of almond croissants. And I thought that was the height of luxury. And then at one point I went to a fancy bakery. I was out on a trip and I went and tried their almond croissant. And now Tesco's local almonds ash in my mouth. There's no comparison. But yeah, that's, if I'm going for a treat or indulgence, almond croissant is the way to go.
That's awesome. My wife is also a fan of the almond croissant.
Yeah,
there is a frozen Trader Joe's version of almond croissants that we're big fans of. I don't know if we're speaking heresy here, but
No. In my opinion, if you can freeze something, go for it.
So I want to talk about some of the characterization that you've done in Orla.
Yeah.
It is so rich and so captivating. But there are several some number. We're going to come up with a number here of characters in this book that I do not like. I'm not supposed to like them. Nobody is supposed to like them. There's a character, and I'm his name's the douche, and I'm just going to put it out there. Do you like puke a little bit when you write his stuff?
Oh yeah, like it's horrible. Like like it's one of these things where like so much of it's like gleaning from things you've seen like online and like and taking elements and like it does worry like like some of that stuff that I wrote for him like came worrying like easy, and I was like so I feel ashamed of myself that I'm able to like get in that mindset. So but. Like he's such a horrible character. Like I'm so kind of like
even,
like,
I think I had that even more for the Rick Holster, Holster is whatever his name is.
Yeah, Rick Holster. And for me, Rick Holster's definitely like 100% a lift from like Andrew Tate style, like
sure,
that
it's easy to say who he is, right?
Yeah,
because you can say he is these 6 people that everybody knows who they are, just put into one.
Yeah, into one big mass. And so like on the one hand, it's like he, in a lot of ways, I think Rick Holster's like less threatening than the douche, because like Rick Holster's like a caricature, and like
he's less threatening.
Sorry,
I think he's more threatening. He's more dangerous to society.
Yeah,
but less threatening to Orla.
Yeah, and like for me, with something like the douche thing, what was interesting about that, and is like I was trying to write the douche as someone who like uses a lot of like weaponized faux therapy speak, and like it was almost more insidious than someone outright saying like women should be in the kitchen and we're coming after you, right?
No, he wants her to tell her to think that he wants her to come up with that on her own. They're trying to manipulate so that people will do what he wants them to do without him having to tell them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like total like gaslighting 101 essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like so it was fun to kind of like write these like horrific characters and know they were going to get like their shit wrecked by
right. Well, in certain ways,
Yeah.
like that's the interesting part about it. One of the things that really stands out to me about the execution of this book is that there are characters and scenarios that you can expect, that you say, hey, well, here's a guy, he's gonna die, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has a different solution, maybe something else happens, or this thing's gonna happen here, and so it's very surprising. But every decision is logical, is understandable within the realm of what's going on. And we talked about some of the shits in this book, but Gwyn is another character that's in there that I was not sure where he was going. Even though I knew he was good. I knew that he was not a threat to her from the beginning, right? So I knew that he was never gonna be a threat. But I wasn't sure where he was gonna land in everything. I kind of thought certain things were going to happen, and it changed my way around. But where does that character come from? Somebody who is confident in who he is and trying to evoke that confidence in himself and others.
I mean, like for me, essentially with Gwyn, I was trying to create in some ways like a mirror to Orla, where like Orla has like this thing where like she sees Gwyn's like, oh, who's this like this great guy, and I have to keep all these secrets because like if he discovers like the real me, like he's going to reject me, he's going to like be terrified, like I might kill him. But really like with Gwyn, like in a lot of ways, although it's like less dramatic, he's going through the same thing as Orla is going through, which is like I've got like these parts of myself that I'm like ashamed by, and that kind of like I'm haunted by, but I'm trying to really create this curated sense of like the person that I want to be, like to project outwards into the world. And like essentially like that's part of the message of the book, that essentially like we're all trying to curate these versions of ourselves and make palpable versions of ourselves, and like love isn't about like convincing someone or like tricking someone into thinking you're perfect. It's finding someone who like will see all those flaws and all those imperfections in you, and like whether that be depression or murdering people and devouring their remains. Like I'm like
yeah. I mean,
like like it's finding someone who like acknowledges you and all your flaws and ugly and messiness, but loves you regardless. And so yeah, like so essentially like women, but with that, I was trying to create kind of like a example of showing that like this isn't exclusive to Orla. Like all people have like things like this, and like they all have people like project a sense of themselves into the world. We don't know what's going on in their head and what they're struggling with, and that was what I was trying to go for Gwen as well, and also just was like trying to create like someone who I thought was like a fun counterpart to Orla, because Orla's so like anxious and so like tightened up and restrained. I wanted to create someone who kind of like maybe was the opposite in some ways as well, and encouraged her to kind of come out of her shell a little bit. So that's what I was trying to do with Gwen.
No, he's a wonderful character. He's I love him. I think he's everything that he needs to be. One of the things about this book and what you guys have done is there are technical decisions that you make in terms of how you're going to craft the story and what's going to happen at this point or at that point that are important decisions. They can go one way or the other. The way that the fifth issue happens could have not worked, right? It's huge part of the story, and I cannot wait for people to read it. I want more people to read this book, but the way that it was delivered made all the sense for these characters that we've been with for the first 4 issues. I kudos for that, because a lot of people will lose sight of where they're trying to be and take a big swing and miss.
I think you have to have a sense of like where you want to go with a story. Like I know I hear some people that love to just kind of improvise and see where the story takes them. I think you need to have a sense of intentionality in mind, and I always knew like that's where we're going to get to. But in terms of like the structure of the story and like why I made the decisions I made, one big thing for me, and I remember I got a little bit of pushback from it, like in like my writing group way back when I was first like writing the scripts and sharing them, but it was a very conscious decision for me that issue 1 I would set up the premise, I would introduce like the character and the stakes, and like this idea of like this woman who's like navigating Seattle's single scene and like dating scummy men, and she turns into like this monster when she gets too angry or scared, and like devours them. And then introduce like this idea of like maybe there's like an organization in the hunt for her, and like all these little like A-plot developments essentially.
Sure.
But I always knew from the beginning that issue 2 would essentially like then put most of that stuff in the background. And issue 2 is essentially like a hangout issue with like Orla and Gwen, but it's just like them on their first date.
Yep.
And like when you've only got 5 issues, like devoting a whole issue to just like 2 characters hanging out is like a quite costly like investment. But like in my head, like I thought this is the crux of the whole series, because where we go in issue 5 and the kind of like flights of fancy of like monster madness and all this and full out theatrics, people are only going to be invested in that if we put in the groundwork to make them care about Orla and Gwen early on. So the book only works if like you're viewing this as like, I'm invested in these 2 and I want these 2 people to be happy. Like, forget about the monsters, forget about people being eaten. Like, are these 2 going to make it out okay? And that's like, so that's where the kind of investment came into in issue 2. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that comes off, that pans out later on, all comes back to that earlier issue. And hopefully we've done our job. It means like, like people are invested enough in that relationship at this point that they'll follow us wherever we go from there.
Sure. I grant you that issue 2 is critical, because the things that pay off between the 2 of them in issue 5 and whatever else, but there are the other characters that are also kind of really fleshed out or introduced further in issue 2.
Yeah.
Also come to play much later on. So I think that all the stuff that happened at the end of the book is like I said earlier, that it all pays off because of the investments you made earlier. There's something else you mentioned kind of, and I want to come back to it. And it's one of the things I thought of as I was looking through this is there are other characters that exist in this world. And there's kind of a statement that you make or a question that you pose to the reader. What do we do? What can we do when we tell people the truth and they don't want to hear it?
Yeah.
It's very real in a very tangible manner in a couple of the characters in there, but it's also out there in the world. Like we're experiencing this everywhere with everything, all in our news, in our social media, everything,
politics, social events,
right? So we tell people, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's gonna happen, and people don't want to hear that. They don't want to see the reality that's in front of them.
Yeah, no, I can say, it can be like as far as like dating goes, but also it can be even things as simple as like for me, like I look at the news, like and I feel like I'm going insane where like I'm watching all this stuff, like for example with AI, and I can tell like in about like 10 years, if we're lucky, we're going to have some documentary about the massive collapse of AI and the damage it caused, and all these people are going to be saying it was a total surprise, no one saw it coming, no one warned us this was going to happen. I feel like that's what we've been fucking doing.
all the comics folks will be like,
yeah. But I think like the quote that's said in the book is sometimes you have to let people make their own mistakes. Well,
sure.
A lot of folk, like if you tell them something they're not ready to hear it, like all that's going to happen is it's going to isolate you from them, and it's going to put them more in the situation that they're in. Sometimes people have to come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, it's great. Like it's one of the things about. So you do a great job of it, really, really putting that in there. And you kind of mention it in a little bit in other ways, but like it's part of life. It's part of being a parent. Especially as your kids grow up, and you're like, you tell them all you want, but they're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's one of the things about comics that I'm constantly, talking to people about, that there's so much of reality in comics, and that it will soothe your soul. It will inspire you. It will educate you about people because we're telling stories, and that's how humanity has evolved, is by telling each other stories. There's another line in the book in issue 4. Gwen's mom says something that really struck me. I think it's beautiful. I think what she said is very beautiful. Most of us are better than the worst thing we've ever done. That was it was perfect within the moment, but what a great quote. Like, I think I want to put that up somewhere. I mean, that is
that was one of those times I was coming up with a line, I thought of that, and I meant, yes, nailed it.
Right, good. You should. That was such a great delivery. And it was while she was trying to soothe her son, it said something about everyone in the book as well.
Yeah,
right?
It's one of those things where like it kind of works nicely as a kind of little general thematic statement, because then I think broadly speaking, like unless like your name is on the Epstein files or something, like, then in which case fuck you. But I think like generally speaking, like a lot of us like live in guilt and think, but that time like I hurt this person or did that, but we are better, like people contain multitudes, like we are like better than like the cruelest thing or the most selfish thing, or the most thoughtless thing we've done. I think that's a kind of like sentiment that should be considered, like, more generally speaking, but specifically in this book, it's a character moment in terms of like it is Gwen's mother telling Gwen like that, she's talking about Orla, but she's saying to him that he too is better than the worst thing he's ever done, which he then goes into in his monologue after that,
right.
So like it's one of these things as well as like learning to be kind to yourself and forgive yourself and be kind to others too. So I'm glad it resonated, because that was like a line that I thought felt quite important to the kind of emotional core of the book.
Yeah, no, it is. It's great. Again, I want more people to read this book. It's coming out in collected form. You can probably get back issues at your local shop, at least issue 1. I'm sure they have a bunch of issue 1s.
Yeah, and Mad Cave, their official website, they're selling all the single issues as well.
So yeah,
I
want to shout out to that, because right now, this is, you're silly to not do this. You can go right now onto Mad Cave's website and order the bundle, which is the first 5 issues digitally and the physical copy of the trade for like less than $20.
Yeah, no. Mad Cave actually is such a good model for this, because like whenever a book, like literally once they announce a book, like not even the release, when the book first gets announced, like like in like the press release or whatever, you go on the website and then right away you can pre-order issue 1 in print, you can pre-order issue 1 digitally, and you can also pre-order the eventual collected edition of the series, like, in print or digitally, or you can get what you're mentioning, which is the series bundle, which is every month you will be sent a digital PDF of each issue as it's released, and then when the collection comes out, they'll get that in print.
Yeah, no, it's great. My shop was not a carrier, and it upset me, so that's how I ended up doing it. And I need to talk to Medcave because I need somehow I dropped off their mailing list, so we need to fix that.
I'll shout them about it.
No, I know who to talk to. We're good. We're good. I was thinking about wearing my Mad Cave shirt, so I didn't, but we went with the Shelley Bond shirt. So I want to pivot just a little bit to some of your other work. And when you kind of started off doing independent stuff that we kickstarted with Standard and Sync and stuff like that, and then you became part of like the initial AWA thing with Hotel, and Hotel was probably my favorite of the initial links releases from AWA. Can we talk a little bit about that story and where you came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the funny how it started at first was I got like a notification on Twitter, like Axel Alonso has followed you, and I laughed and thought it was like a joke. Someone made a fake account, but then it turned out no, it was the actual Axel Alonso. And then he kind of DM'd me at the time, and he was like, "I'm a big fan of Sync. I've been reading it, and I would love to like talk about working together on some." This was like back in 2018 before AWA even announced. So like I said, well, I'm away to New York for New York Comic Con, but when I'm back, we can set up like a video call or something if you want. He says, well, I'm based in New York, so if we want, we can have a meeting for lunch beforehand. It was like I had my biggest meeting of like that week before the convention even started. Let's say I was in town from Monday, I had like lunch with Axel on Tuesday, and I remember I was like, for me, like, because I come from Glasgow, like, my blood runs cold. So when I go to like New York in October, that's like summer weather for me. I'm like walking around in my shorts and t-shirt, like, this is roasting. Yeah. This is like, so like I went to this meeting like with Axel, went to lunch like in this nice fancy Italian restaurant, like my shorts and t-shirts, sweating like a pig. And then like like Axel told me about the plan. They're going to be launching this new publisher called AWA. And they were looking for like a new like roster of like up and coming talent to like go alongside the established names they had to kind of create like a line of books. And he said, and I was thinking, you could kind of pitch something for us. And it was just my first example of like usually like whenever I've pitched a publisher, like I've had an idea ahead of time, like I developed an idea and thought, right now who am I going to pitch this to? Right. But like this was like I said, like we want you to come up with something for us. And then I remember the brief that Axel gave was he said, I love like Sync, so could you do another anthology style book? And I said, sure. It's like something that's like the similar idea of it's like one shots, but it kind of comes together to form part of a larger whole. I said, sure, I like doing anthologies. And then he said, can you do something else with clowns in it? And I'm sitting there in my head, and I said yes, because that's what he said. But in my head, I'm sitting thinking that the last thing I'm going to do is another fucking clown book. So it actually became a challenge where I thought, like, how can I do like a clown, but that's different as possible to the kind of mad, feral, like van-dwelling clowns of Sync. So I ended up looking into this thing with the history of like Commedia dell'arte and Piero, and I thought I'll do that kind of clown. And then like in terms of like a framing device, I can't remember if it was something Axel had mentioned. He was talking about ideas or something. He'd mentioned something like, and from the perspective of like a crime stories, like he was saying, I always thought it'd be interesting to have like a crime book where like, there's like some hotel that criminals are hiding out at and things. And I wasn't really interested in doing that because like Sync is kind of a crime book. And then I was thinking about hotels, and that kind of like thing lingered in my head. And the weird thing when it all clicked into place for me was that later that day I was back at my hotel in New York, and I was in like the toilet, getting like ready, and the bathroom door was open, and I looked into the bedroom, and like they have one of those mirrors that you can see like the bedroom reflecting back into the bathroom.
Yeah.
And the bed was like, one of those beds that's kind of like a mattress, and you just have the kind of like, the four like poster legs and have the hollow space underneath. And had this idle thought of, wouldn't it be scary if I looked in that mirror and I saw someone under the bed looking back at me?
Sure.
And then that's
it's a terrifying book. You totally
and then it became like the story for like the third issue of Hotel, with the guy that lives in the walls. And then things started coming together from there. I was thinking, what if I did this place? Like there's like an old roadside motel, and people check into it, and it's like, I think each story is a different room, and it all kind of connects and overlaps in interesting ways. And like, so that's where Hotel came in, and it all came together. And so I put together a pitch quite quickly based off that format. I came up with like 4 like story ideas, came up with ideas of how they could overlap and interchange. And I sent the pitch to Axel shortly after I got back home from New York. And the pitch at the time was called Next Exit, No Vacancy. And Axel got back to the pitch, said, we love this pitch, it's amazing, but I want to change the name to Hotel, but it's like 2 L's, like hell, and it's like a hotel sign, and the O and the T is like blanked out, so it says hell. So that was Axel that came up with that. And then like the rest is history from there. Like, we got, with AWA paired me up with the creative team of Dalibor, Tala Each, and Lee Lowridge, and Colours, and Sal Cipriano, and Letters. And like, when I look at that team, like, they're all seasoned like vets. I was like, who the fuck is this guy newbie in that team? I'm like, so I felt I'm really under pressure. Like, I need to live up to like the standard of these guys. And yeah, it was a nice, pleasant surprise. The book ended up doing really well. I don't think it was considered to be one of like the top tier of the initial AWA launch. Obviously, the focus was on like the Resistance and the sheer superheroes hero universe.
Sure, because Joe gets all the press, but let's be honest.
It ended up selling really well. Like the sales of it were like fantastic. And I think that and then when the collection came out like in October, it ended up being I think it was in the top 10 for best graphic novels like of the entire direct market for that month. And it was a nice rebound, because I remember like the launch for that series was a big launch event planned for AWA where they had launches all over the world. But it was like, I was doing a signing for Forbidden Planet Glasgow to launch Hotel, and they had like, J. Michael Straczynski doing like a launch somewhere in New York, and they had like, also it was all spread over. They had all these creators like for their launch line of books. And then the week that was supposed to happen was the week that everything went into lockdown for COVID-19. So, like, like that signing was the first of many things that would get cancelled over the next year as lockdown went on and on. So I was thinking, oh my God, this is like the classic Lee's luck. I've had a massive launch, and it's like happened the comic shops closing down. I fucked it. But it ended up being like, obviously, weirdly enough, like, comic sales did well during COVID because folks set up like pull lists and were getting books sent to them and things. So anyway, it ended up still doing really well, and it picked up a really strong audience. Like I say, then it made the top 10 graphic novels when the collection came out. And then a year later, when I started to go back to conventions, suddenly I had all these new fans who'd read Hotel and lockdown were coming to pick up other stuff. So it ended up being a really interesting book. And something else I'm happy about is like the success of Hotel was what led to the Crimson Cage, and the Crimson Cage was a big passion project of mine. And I don't think that AWA would have signed off on a wrestling Shakespeare book if it hadn't been for the fact the Hotel had been such a big success.
Everybody needs a wrestling Shakespeare book.
Yeah. It's one of these things. Again, it's a really specific niche of like wrestling and Macbeth, but if you like those things, I think you'll hopefully like this book. So that was the gamble.
No, that's great. One of the things also that when I'm looking back at your careers, so far to this point, you've worked with a lot of people consistently. Alex Cormack, you've worked with a bunch. Joe Mulvey, I've seen you work with a bunch. This is not live, and I'm sure Joe is upset that it's not live, so he can't pop in because he typically watches the show. How do you like when you are able to go back and rework with someone that you've worked with before, that you have a relationship with, and kind of try something different?
I mean, it's really deeply disappointing that I have to work with Joe because he's a terrible.
Of course, it's always a disappointment for Joe.
Yeah, it was like scum, but no, just kidding. I love you, Joe. But like, yeah, no, like for me, like that's part of like the purest joy of comics is like finding people that you love telling stories with and like continuing to tell stories with them. Like I love like for me there's no greater joy than like finishing a project with somebody and going, okay, let's think about what we're gonna do next, like, and keep those relationships going. And for me, I feel like that's part of like the me that does stories with Alex Cormack is different from the me who does stories with Joe Mulvey, who's different from the me who does stories with Ian Laurie, and like those relationships, like for me, that's part of the joy is like thinking, okay, well, what is it that makes like that pairing interesting, and how can we explore that in new ways, and what things can we do with that, and it becomes an ongoing process where like once I know how an artist works and I've got like a rapport with them, it then becomes easier to start thinking of stories with them in mind. Like with Alex Cormack, like he's like a really kind of like faithful collaborator. Like I'll put together a script and he's genuinely very good because we have very similar sensibilities. I think it's partly because we've like written, so we work together so much where I'm writing already with like his style in mind. But generally, apart from the fact that like the only real changes when you get an Alex Cormack, the art back from a script you've sent to Alex Cormack is usually there's more blood and less clothes. But other than that, like things are pretty like accurate. So in that sense, we have like a very kind of similar sensibility, same sense of humor. We laugh at the same stuff. We find a lot of the same things interesting. So that's a very harmonious relationship where it's very much like, it's almost to the point whenever I come up with any idea, I'm automatically thinking of it in like the style of Alex Cormack's art, and I have to train myself to like think of someone else because Alex can't draw everything. You can only draw almost everything. But then on the other hand, you have someone like Ian Laurie who did And Then Emily Was Gone with me, who I'm like a long time friend of, and like I was an admirer and fan of his before we became friends. But we have totally different storytelling sensibilities, like where there's this constant push and pull where he wants to go really abstract and kind of like sort of like strange and like really kind of like almost like Eraserhead levels of lynching and like totally like out there, and I'm very much grounded in like emotion and character and like structure. So you had this, and then we was gone this constant kind of like push and pull. We had like different ideas, and it was never kind of like sort of contentious. We always kind of like had like productive discussions, but because of that push and pull, the end result was like you look at it and then it was gone. It simultaneously is probably still the weirdest and most out there thing I've done, but also the most kind of like emotional and like coherent narratively thing that Ian's done. Like so it's that interesting middle ground between the two. So I always think the relationship that you form with like artists is like, one, it's like really fun, but also like it's the bedrock of like comics collaboration, especially if like you're a writer like me who's not gifted with the obnoxious talent I've also been able to draw. So like so it's helpful to start and like have these relationships. And yeah, like I look at guys like Alex and Joe and like Ryan Lee, or Adam Cahoon who did Dynasty, like or Sally, and like I want to like keep on telling stories of these people, and I want to like like that for me is the dream, to have like a roster of artists who like still find me tolerable and want to work with me, and like we keep on telling stories together.
Yeah, no, that's all great stuff. I think that's the point. I think that's the point of comics, in just that there is this collaboration, and I hate to hear the person who says, oh well, I don't really talk to the writer. I just get the script and I do what I think I can do, and then I send it to the editor. I love to hear.
Like for me, like, sorry to cut you off, like but for me that's like something I always try and avoid if I can, like, because like if there's others, even if a situation where it's like the editorial team have chosen the artist and colorist, I'll still always try and set up a side channel. So like, let's see if we can get a direct, talk to me if you have any ideas, because I think that's really important, that communication. That if it's all segmented, then it becomes hollow.
When you started, when you said I'm going to write comics, did you know that that's what you were looking for? Is that what you wanted? Like what made you decide that you wanted to tell stories in this format, in this medium?
It's interesting. It's kind of like a weird kind of like backwards process where I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've always loved comics, but I never really put the two and two together that you could write comics until like quite late in the process. Where I remember like what I wanted to do, like first, like I wanted to be a novelist, like that was because that was the first idea of like writing when I was like a young kid. And then I did like then I wanted to do screenplays, and I remember I did like film and TV at university. And I'd written like a short film script, and I ended up not going anywhere because like a location fell through, and I had a whole bunch of budget set aside for something that I was never going to make. So it's kind of at a loose end after I just graduated from university. I didn't know what I was wanting to do other than like some big idea of wanting to write. And it was an artist friend of mine who like we used to meet up regularly, like and not go to the comic shop together and pick up comics. And they were like, I want to do a comic. Could you write a comic script for like me to draw? And so I thought, I don't know how to write a comic script, but I'll look into it and I'll do some research. So I ended up like doing some research on like what's involved in a comic script, and I became fascinated with like the process. And like particularly I was fascinated by like the restraints and what you can't do, like how much it's like, you know, you only have so many pages to tell a story, only so many panels per page, only so many words per panel. So you have like this like framework you're contained within. It's like how can you be inventive and like create a sense of like doing more than you're actually doing within that kind of like framework. I thought it was a really interesting challenge, and because like comics is a relatively new medium, I thought it's like there's like avenues to do things that haven't been done before in this medium, which is really exciting. And that became how I wanted to write comics. So I ended up the artist friend in question wanted me to write something really grounded and gritty and like noirish. And instead, I wrote like a superhero comic called The Standard, and they were like, "This is really good, but there's no way whatsoever that I'll be able to draw this," like, you know. And I was like, oh well. And then it ended up being like I had that script sitting aside, and then like
so it was The Standard that you wrote.
Yeah, The Standard was the first ever comic strip to wrote, was The Standard issue 1. And then it was like this guy Stephen Forbes, who was an editor, who did this feature called The Proving Grounds, where people would send him their scripts and he would edit them, normally like with like vicious feedback, like, you know, like this is terrible and here's why. So that's what, you know, this would be like interesting to send this in to see where I'm going wrong. But when I sent it in, like Steve was actually like, this is really good. This is the first time I've had a script for this feature. I've actually like kept on reading past the little segment I was doing for the comics. I wanted to see how it finished. And he ended up becoming like my comics mentor, where he kind of like taught me a lot about like what's involved in a comic script, and a lot of things he taught me are things I still do now. In a comic script, little things like, you know, maybe the readers, you know, like won't notice it's only in the script. Like, for example, a lot of things like always saying what time of day it is, even if it's an interior exterior scene, because like, you know, that will impact how the artist draws it. Always mention, like, if a character's like on panel, like always describe what their emotion is or what their expression is. Don't say just, and this person is also there, because like, you know, if someone's like, you know, nodding in earnest agreement or rolling in their eyes in the background, that's going to have a different impact. And like so it's like little things like that, like, you know, that like really they've always like stayed with me. So yeah, and then from there, like, you know, by the time I got to the end of The Standard, I was like, I now know how to write comics. By the time I've got to like the last issue of this 6-issue series, and then the rest is history from there. I just like fell in love with the format, and I wanted to keep on doing stuff in it. And like, you know, and like sometimes it's like I have a story in my head, and then I come up with the story, and then it's like, what artist is going to draw this? And other times it's like you said, it's like I see an artist, and I think this is an amazing artist. I want to think up a story for them to draw. Like, and then Emily Was Gone was essentially Ian Laurie fan fiction. When I wrote it, I was like, you know, I'm going to write something that Ian Laurie would draw. So like, yeah, like the motivation was different, but yeah, definitely like in a roundabout way to get my very long answer to your question. Like, yeah, like, you know, like working with artists was certainly part of like kind of like inspiration behind wanting to make comics.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So we've talked about what you've currently just finished. We talked about some of the stuff you did earlier in your career. What's next?
Well, obviously the first thing on the agenda is Orla coming out in shops April 21st. From there, we've got we've been seeing the early rumblings of it on Kickstarter, but the next big project is The Curious Trade of Grogwood and Shanks. That's your Comics Tribe. The premise of that series is it's kind of like a high fantasy / procedural mystery, where it is a dwarf tailor and his orc steward / bodyguard who travel around from place to place in this like high fantasy realm trying to sell their wares, and they end up getting caught up in various mysteries. So it's kind of like somewhat like Sinking Hotel. It's almost anthology style, where each issue is a separate self-contained mystery, but there's gonna be a larger kind of like personal story between the characters that emerges over the course of the show. But it's the idea was, when I was thinking about behind the development of this series, I was thinking like, every time I try and get into fantasy, like when I'm reading like for novels, it's always like, you know, part 1 of the 14-part Goblin Balls adventure, like, you know, and it's like, you know, like what, like I want to try to do something that's kind of like, you know, like short and sweet and kind of really containing and get a wee full story, which is why like I wanted to kind of create something that was like almost like watching like Columbo or something, but like, you know, it's like dwarfs and orcs and elves and whatever else. So that was kind of initial premise behind it, and then like working with Joe, obviously I've known Joe for like 15 years. And then like it was such a big deal. We were going to finally get to work together for the first time on The Last Ride of Power and Pride for Aftershock, and then like
right,
yeah. Then,
I mean, I'm still waiting for it. I'm still waiting for it. Eventually, we'll get to see it.
Yeah. Well, and then so like we thought, well, let's do something else together, like, you know, because we really want to work together. So we came up with Grogor and Shanks, and like I've written like 8 issues of this thing, you know, so there's a whole lot banked. But then so the eventually became like how we're going to do this series. And I went to like a government body here in the UK called Creative Scotland, which funds creative projects. And it's like apparently it's a real long shot, Hail Mary, like the rate of like success is like really was like 20% or something. But I put together a pitch for the Curious Trade of Grogor Shanks as a 4-issue miniseries, and I got like a funding grant for it to make like these 4 issues. So then I went to Comics Tribe, my old pals who do Sync, and then Emily was gone.
Yeah.
And said, like, I've got this book, like, I've got a budget for it, like, how about we, you know, I put it together, may release it, and they were like, absolutely, like, you know, Tyler's like, if I could buy shares in John Lee's, I would, but, you know, anything you want to do for me, let's go for that. So we went for them, and Comics Tribe have their kind of like hybrid model, but what they do is they tend to release like special edition, like exclusive Kickstarter books, usually like 2 issues in one, or like, you know, or like with the, you know, original covers and stuff. So they do that first, because like Kickstarters where they have their big audience, because like Tyler James, the publisher of Comics Tribe, Kickstarter guy, like his best known is like his day job is Comics Launch, which is like the kind of like big crowdfunding podcast / tutorial series. So like they start off doing Kickstarter, and then after they do Kickstarter, they then go to the direct market and release the single issues. And after they've released the single issues in comic shops, they then go back to Kickstarter to do the collection, which then eventually comes out in comic shops as well. So we've done like the first of the 2 Kickstarters, the Grogor and Shanks book 1, which included issues 1 and 2. I think I have a copy here. Here we go, which has got 2 stories in it. Very nice book, very nice finish. And Joe is currently working on the artwork for the second one of those, which is hopefully going to be launched on Kickstarter in the next couple of months. Awesome. And then this summer, we're then going to comic shops with the Curious Trade of Grogor and Shanks, which will be a 4-issue miniseries. Release those 4 issues. So if you missed it on Kickstarter, that'll be a chance to get it. Again, it's kind of went under the radar a little bit, because then, like, obviously, like, people know me more for Sync or like my books that are coming out in comic shops. But I really love Grogor and Shanks. I think the scripts are some of my favorite scripts I've ever written, especially once we get into like chapters 3 and 4 and onwards, you know, where like I really get into the characters and things. And then like again, it's very much outside my wheelhouse. I'm going for horror and type stuff. This is like fantasy, and it's kind of quite knives out tone, quite funny, quite witty. So like it's a bit different from what I usually do, but I think if people give it a shot, I think they'll still enjoy it and get something out of it. And then like after Grogor and Shanks, the next thing's like more Sync. Sync Volume 4 is going to be coming out. We've been doing Kickstarter campaigns for that. The Sync Halloween special is going out to backers now, I believe. I think people are getting them. It's just arriving in their inboxes, or not their, or their post boxes. And so like that's going out to backers. And then we're currently developing the next Sync Kickstarter, which is Sync Pineapple, which to try and give out like an elevator pitch for that, would be like giallo murder mystery in a sex dungeon. Essentially it's like picking up on like the characters Kieran and Louise from Sync 10, who are kind of fan favorites. So that story, for folk who never read Sync, like that chapter was about this couple who are kind of like, they're both kind of like divorcees that are getting back in the dating scene. And then like they go back to like her place, and then like it turns into like a like BDSM like role play session, and then like once like the guy's like tied up to bed with like a massive insertable like rammed up somewhere, like there's a massive home invasion that kind of happens, and it's like
so definitely invasions going on,
and they're fighting for their life in this bizarre situation. So and people ended up like, you know, really responding to that story, because despite of like the kind of like outrageous elements of it. Like, this is really sweet, and really like these characters, and I kind of like invested in them. And weirdly enough, it became a kind of like dry run for Orla in terms of like how can we like get people invested in like a couple like in a high kind of like elevated genre scenario. So yeah, I brought those characters back for this one. So it's kind of like them coming back for a 2-part story this time. So that's going to be the next Kickstart, which is again going to be launched in the next couple of months. I'm not sure what's coming next between that or Grogor and Shanks too. With one of them is coming first, but like both of them will be like arriving soon. So yeah, that's going to be what's keeping me busy for the next year. And I've got something else I'm working on that's not going to be coming out till like late 2027, early 2028. So I can't really talk about it now, but it's a new thing that I'm working on with the artist from the Nasty, Adam Cahoon, and that's going to be a whole lot of fun. So hopefully, like, watch this space for that.
That's fantastic. That's so much good stuff. I'm excited for it. I think one of the things about talking to folks like you is seeing how much you have a passion for doing this, for telling stories, for feeding imagination, taking your imagination, coming up with ideas and hoping that people will be interested in it. And I think you do a great job of translating that. Now Orla's coming out, the trade's coming out. The one thing about this story is that it is done, but there's room for more. It is not. There's nothing that follows directly from it, right? There's nothing that is, he's just going to do this. I hope, and this is just, I'm putting this out there, I hope that there is more Orla, because I know that it's going to be something that you're going to have to spend some time to figure out how to re-enter that world in a way that's going to live up to what you did in the first volume.
Yeah, like for me, like Orla was conceived to be like a kind of self-contained story. Like, that's one and done. So like if I was doing more, it wouldn't be like a continuation of the series. It'd probably be like Orla 2, like the sequel. But although I wrote that series originally, I originally conceived that series and pitched that series as a self-contained miniseries, but I love those characters. Like,
Sure.
Orla and Gwen are like two of my favorite people that live in my head. Like,
sure.
I'm like, I'd be happy to check in on them again. So I don't have any objection to doing a sequel and come up with more of if I could come up with like a good story for it. And I've had some like, inklings of like where I would possibly take it. But obviously it would depend on like the book would have to sell well, like
sure. Well, I'm going to do everything I can to help with that one.
And like if that happened, then I'm sure like Mad Cave would be amenable. But currently, like me and Sally have been like developing and pitching like a different idea, which is kind of like would bring back the same creative team for something that's like thematically linked to Orla, but it's like a new story. But absolutely, I would have no objection to doing more Orla in the future. Like, I'm not saying absolutely never say never. Like, if I come up with a good idea for it, and there's a demand and interest for it, then yeah, by all means, I would do more.
No, absolutely. And I thought about it. I was intentional about how I approach that, because like I said, I don't think you just next day this is what happens, unless it's really approaching it from something else. There's got to be a story that's different from what we learned in this story.
For essentially, like, it's that whole thing of like Orla has like built in like this kind of like, it has this kind of like real world ground. This idea of like like dating and like putting yourself out there, and like I said, curated versions of yourself, either it be for dating or for just professional careers. So it has this kind of like kernel of like, here's a relatable human experience which we're now adding monsters and stuff to.
Sure.
So I'd have to have something similar, like, where I was like, okay, here's something that's relatable that I can then like build on that and go like, now here's like the Orla version of that. So
right.
That, and that's what it'll be.
All right. Well, we will be talking about Orla coming out. We will be talking about these Kickstarters. Maybe we'll get you back on when one of them's live and we can talk about it. That'd be awesome.
I'll talk about my favorite subject myself.
That's good. Maybe we'll work it and get Joe on with you or something.
I don't like Joe. That's my style.
Well, Joe Krabs just thought. Joe Krabs always.
All
All you gotta do is
I
draw.
want to get a word in edgeways. No. Okay, actually, now that I mention it, like I've actually got a chance for revenge here, right? If you'll humor me, because Joe always tells this story every time he goes in a podcast, and he gets it wrong every time. So I'd like to like take this opportunity to clear the air.
That is fine. We're giving you the floor.
Okay, good. Joe Mulvey tells this story about we were in Seattle together for a convention, and there was the big thing about how no one could understand my accent, and I was trying to order this thing off the menu, and I kept on saying like a burger. Can I have a burger, please? And the waitress didn't understand that I was saying the word burger. And we're kind of looking. So eventually they figured it out, and as they were walking past, Joe grabbed the waitress and said, "Bring him soup." And then we're all going to pretend that you thought you ordered soup, and so the way he tells the story is the waitress put the soup down in front of me, and I lose it, and I start going like, "I ordered a burger, what's going on here? This is outrageous!" And then I didn't know what was going on, and they were like, "Ha ha ha!" We got you. That's not what happened. What actually happened in this story was the waitress brings the soup and sits it down, and I immediately look at Joe, who's going.
Right.
So I know that's why I know that it's Joe that's done it. And in my head, I'm thinking like pro wrestling logic, but I'm thinking don't sell the rib. I'm just going to have a completely straight face. I'm going to eat this soup like nothing's happened.
Sure.
So I'm then going to take a spoonful of the soup. I take a mouthful and it's ice cold. I go, and that's when I lose it. I was like, "Why'd you give me cold soup?" So that's just for the record for clarifying the facts after the slander that Joe's put forward in the past.
Well, listen, we always need to correct Joe's slander. Just make sure that there's plenty of swords for him to draw, and he'll be very happy.
Lots of detailed backgrounds that we're going to in the next stories.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, but seriously though, me and Joe have a great time living on a podcast together.
Absolutely.
So when we're doing Grog on Chance, we're launching that. I would love to come back on with Joe and talk to you.
That'd be awesome. John, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. That's awesome.
Thank you.
This has been a production on the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?